Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this program today we'll be discussing the serious situation facing Israel and the Jewish people in Australia and how Australian Christians are rallying around the cause of Israel and the Jewish people. And I have two special guests join me all the way from Australia. They are Tricia Chivers and also Matt Chivers, who is the National Director for Bridges for Peace. So a warm welcome to the Middle East Report, and it's always a delight to have Australians on the programme.
Thank you so much. We're privileged and honoured to be here, so thank you, Simon.
It's a pleasure. I'll start off with you, Matt, if that's all right. If you could just share with us something about your background of being born in Australia, your childhood growing up in Australia, and how you came to faith in Yeshua HaMashiach.
Oh, absolutely. I was born into a Christian family. My parents were Christians to the best of their knowledge growing up, and always had a loving family environment. Went to church, remember going to Sunday school and all those things, but we lived in the country, so we're always sort of out in the bush areas of, I was born in the the country area of Sydney, out towards the Hawkesbury, and then we moved north, but loved growing up, beautiful country, obviously, everyone loves to go to Australia, and then only my sister and I sort of wandered away from the Lord in my teenage years, never really turned my back on God, but just stopped following, I guess. I still had a positive influence, never went real wild. And then through an accident, when I was 20 years of age, my wife's sister was killed in a car accident, and that brought me back to the Lord. My wife and I at the same time got born again at the very same moment at a Hillsong service in Sydney, and have never looked back since, and been in Christian ministry, pastoring churches, and now we serve God in Bridges for Peace.
Amazing. And Tricia, warm welcome to the programme. So I think our viewers, because we have a married couple on the programme, they're always asking that very, very question. What's the story between how you two met? And this one is also linked to your very, very powerful testimony as well.
Well, living in a small country town, it was only a very small town. It was where the hippie movement started in Australia, what I'd say on the coast there. So I grew up as a straight family, in a straight family, one of the well-to-do members of the community. But as we sort of grew up, I didn't have any church background or anything like that. And young people usually hung out together, and we happened to meet. And this is something for those people out there that are probably struggling within a relationship, or they've made a mistake in their life and will change, because I was married to someone else, and I made a choice to walk away from them and walk with Matthew. We actually left the town then and moved to Sydney, and as Matthew said, his sister was killed in a car accident, and we gave our lives to the Lord. But God just changed me with so much. I had people that knew me because I grew up in this town, and from birth to 23, and people sort of looked at me then differently, because they said, what she's got now, we want. So I didn't get to witness to too many people in that town, but that, I heard bits and pieces from people saying, how much of a change they saw in me from giving my life to the Lord to what I was beforehand. So that's how we met, and we went from strength to strength there with that.
Yeah, and share from your experience, Matt, how the Lord heals the brokenhearted.
Oh, absolutely.
And how He's restored both of you as a powerful couple in the Lord.
Exactly, and it's a testimony really of the grace and faithfulness of God. It's and I never cease to be amazed at the faithfulness of God in our journey. As I said, my sister was killed, the sister who I loved dearly. There was only the two of us. She was killed on the Saturday. On the Sunday, we went to church and got born again that very night. And we were living together prior to that. We chose to instantly, God worked in our hearts that we needed to live apart, so we started living apart until we came together in marriage about 9 months later. We got married and walked with the Lord, and just the transformation in both our lives. And one of the great joys of my life, and I know it's a foundation of everything we've done in ministry together, from pastoring church to working with Bridges for Peace, has been my absolute awe, it's the only word I can put to it, of how Trish has come from no church, no godly Bible background at all, to just loving God and allowing God to work in her life and in both of our lives to bring our marriage together. We've got 5 incredible children, 6 grandchildren, and just gone from strength to strength. But I credit a lot to that, to knowing that Trish, as my wife, my partner in life, my best friend, has just sold out to God and let God be God in her life individually, not just riding on my coattails as her husband or anything like that. Her own personal journey with the Lord has been absolutely inspiring to me.
Amazing. And Tricia, just share with us where both the Lord gave poured out his love and understanding of Israel and the Jewish people upon your hearts. Because prior to meeting Matt in our office, he was sharing how Israel wasn't on his radar. He wasn't anti-Israel. He was just indifferent, like most church ministers are. But what was it about the Lord that really brought you in regarding his heart and his love and his passion for Israel?
Probably when we put our hand up to say, well, we'll think about becoming part of Bridges for Peace, and we went to Israel. And it's just like going home. It's a place where people, if you haven't been to Israel, get there, because it is just, God's love just pours out upon you. And you can look at it in a religious way, on I want to do this and this, but it's not. It's just got to, just letting God work through you, the Spirit of God work through you as you journey through his land, because he is a healing God, and he's healed us in multitudes of ways through our journeys backwards and forwards to Israel, and it just lets you think a bit deeper in what it is. So my next part of my journey too is getting to know the Torah and the Bible together. Hebrew and English aren't always the same, so I want to just journey there and get to know a little bit more about what's going on. Excellent. What words really mean.
And Matt, what was it that drew you in terms of God's understanding of Israel and the Jewish people? Because I think the Lord called you into ministry, ministering a church and stuff as well can be a comfortable place. But so much in the Western world, we're seeing this such indifference because of this kind of subtle influence of church replacement theology. Just share with us how God put you in a completely different trajectory when it comes to Israel.
Certainly, and it's a classic story of how God works in our lives. Really, looking back, and it's always interesting. You look back, you see things totally different than when you're looking forward. And hindsight's 20/20 vision, as they say. And we were pastoring a church, happy. We'd been given a multi-million-dollar facility. We were having influence in the community. Yeah, we weren't setting the world on fire, but we were seeing people get saved. And I don't think comfort was a term, but we were definitely at home in what we were doing. And then God brought Keith Buxton, the former National Director of Bridges for Peace, across our radar, miraculously really. And he spoke at our church. We loved the ministry of Bridges for Peace, gave big offerings to Bridges for Peace, but never really switched on in our mind, or me, I can't speak for anyone else, but in my mind or my heart, it was just what you do as a minister, as a pastor. You have ministries come in, you give them an offering, some people sign up to their newsletters and their emails, until next year. Keith came back next year, we did the same thing, 3 times. And I still didn't get it. Loved the message, but didn't get the picture. And then through a series of events, God worked in our hearts. We stepped down from the pastoring, went on knew God was taking us in a different direction, but weren't sure where. And then miraculously, 2 years into this journey, and I remember the day that we stood together in our lounge room after stepping down from the church, because that hurt us. We were sort of pushed out in a way, not because we did anything wrong, but there was stuff happening in the background. And in a way, even though we knew it was God, you're still wrestling with how it happens, because we were hurt, we were broken. We'd given our blood, sweat and tears and our family, and then now we're sort of in no man's land, going through a wilderness journey. And we stood in our lounge room, and Tricia and I held hands and we prayed. And I said to my wife, darling, the one thing we're not going to do through this journey is become bitter and twisted and end up on the scrap heap, as so many pastors do when things happen like this. And then within 2 years of all sorts of different things, nearly losing our house, taking jobs that, I felt God but paid very little, and all sorts of things, I was sitting at my computer. I didn't realise at the time, but I was depressed. And I'm watching sports clips because I love sport, trying to get tired enough to go to sleep, but too tired to be awake, and all these things that are wrestling in my mind and I'm struggling with. And as true as I sit here, Simon, at 8:30 at night, this cry, and the only way I can describe it, this cry came from deep within me, and it had to be my spirit crying out on my behalf, bypassing my intellect and conscious mind, because I wasn't praying, I wasn't doing anything other than watching sports clips. And the cry was, God, I am dying here. And within 10 minutes, the phone rings, and it's Keith Buxton, the National Director of Bridges for Peace, who I hadn't spoken to for 2.5 years. And he didn't know we weren't pastoring, and I began to bawl. I was just bawling and bawling. He's bawling on the other end, and he said, it doesn't matter what happens after this. God's changed my life. I said, God's changed my life. Wow. And I felt like I was back on the team again. Anyway, that was February 2017. May, 3 months later, Tricia and I are in Israel, attending Bridges for Peace, Institute of Israel Studies, and God lit a fire in our heart that to this day burns brighter than ever.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Very emotional to share, but thank you for sharing. Thank you for being real as well. And Tricia, what was it like, being in Israel for the first time? Because it is a culture shock. It is where the Bible comes alive, and somehow the presence of God in Israel is stronger than anywhere else you can be in the world. Just share with us the impact of being in the land and seeing the Bible come alive, and seeing Bible prophecy literally just being before you.
Well, that's it. A lot of people, as we've said, you go into Israel and aren't you scared, aren't you all this? But like the peace that God brings, and travelling around Israel was just, you felt safe. And just seeing where Jesus walked, seeing and hearing the people and connecting with the people, even though you can't speak Hebrew, was just, an amazing thing. So the journey was short with us being there, but it impacted greatly because of the love of God that just shone through in every place we stepped. And listening to, in the meetings, just listening to the different people speak about Israel, it connects you. Institute was just something that helped connect us through, as well as knowing the word. It was them connecting us again in a different light. It was just an amazing thing. So
amazing. And I do research for this program, so I did find there was an article published by the Australian Jewish News that reported back on the 7th of November 2019, where you paid homage to the ANZAC forces. So this is the Australian New Zealander forces that actually took Beersheba and liberated the Holy Land from the 400-year control by the Ottoman Turks. Yes. And also represented the birth of Australia and New Zealand as a nation and a force on the world stage. So share with us what it was like to go there and to remember those brave and courageous ANZAC forces who fought for the liberation of Jerusalem and fulfillment of biblical prophecy.
It was absolutely an amazing time, Simon. It was at my second time in Israel, because obviously in May I was there, Tricia and I were there doing Institute, but it was the first time I'd got to see the land, as in a tour, and travel round and see Israel on the broader picture. But and I just want to give a big shout out to our board member, Barry Rogers, who was instrumental in putting together that tour and the reenactment of the charge and everything, did an amazing job. And watching the horses come down the streets and retracing some of the steps and being there and hearing the history. But one of the most incredible things for me was talking to some of the Jewish people and Israeli citizens in Jerusalem just a few days before the reenactment's about to take place. Because I thought, everyone would be, Israel being such a small country, everyone would be excited about it and know about it. And they're like, what? What's going on? And so even in Jerusalem, many weren't even aware that it was going on. But to be part of that and the proud heritage as an Australian, to know that our forefathers, I didn't have anyone in that battle in particular, but I know people who had grandfathers and uncles, and some have actually passed away in that battle. The pride that it brings, knowing that Australia played an instrumental role with the ANZACs in liberating Jerusalem from Turkish rule, 400 years of Turkish rule, and which opened the way, in Beersheba, not Jerusalem, opened the way for Jerusalem just a few months later to be liberated, was just phenomenal. And to actually be there to watch it unfold in reenacting was really special for us and the whole tour group. And it's something that we try and do every year with our tour. Bring our tours over on around the 31st of October to take part in the commemorative service that the Israeli government puts on down at Beersheba to remember that very moment and to honour the ANZACs.
Amazing. I did have Calvin Crombie coming on a few years ago,
yeah,
talking about the charge of the cavalry and unpacking that story. So it brings back some great memories. And Tricia, can you tell us a little bit about Bridges for Peace in Australia? Because this is a fantastic ministry, and I'm here and I've got to thank Michael Traherne, the UK director, for you both being here on the programme today. So he sacrificed his place on the Middle East Report so you could both have the programme, so I'm very grateful to him. But share with us the great work that Bridges for Peace is doing for Israel and the Jewish people, particularly in the kind of context of Australia and what's happening there.
Well, it's building relationships between Christians and Jews, because a lot of walls go up when we're around a lot of both sides. Jews not wanting to be part of Christian things and Christians, are not there. But, Matthew gets out there and he connects within Christian churches and things like that. He speaks regularly at places, so that just trying to break down walls, trying to let people know that Israel isn't an enemy, and the Jewish people all around Australia aren't enemies. They need our help, they need our protection. And then again, he's connected with Jewish people and the rabbis and things like that, and are building relationships there so that they can see the hearts of some Christians. It's not all, but it is just building that. And then building relationships within our contributors, just so that they get to know a little bit more. They've got a heart for Israel, but it needs to go deeper. And that's what our role is just building relationships. It's getting out there more, and that's what we want to do more of when we go home, is to get out there a lot more in churches, because there are a lot of churches that don't want to know about Israel. But it's time. It's time for God to work through us and to work in areas to change things in Australia.
Well done. So let's have a look at this excellent overview of the ministry that is Bridges for Peace in being a blessing to Israel and the Jewish people. Take a look.
What draws you to Israel? Is it the ancient stories that echo through Scripture? A longing to walk where faith began? Or the quiet pull of God's voice calling you into something eternal? At Bridges for Peace, we believe standing with Israel isn't just a statement, it's a sacred invitation. We don't stand on the sidelines. We step forward in faith and compassion. We feed the hungry, comfort the brokenhearted, support widows and orphans, and help Jewish families return to their ancient homeland. Each act fulfills God's word. Prophecies spoken long ago are now unfolding before our eyes. We're Christians from around the world, building trust, forging relationships, and standing firm with the Jewish people in Israel and around the world. Now is your moment to step into something greater, your opportunity to take your place in God's unfolding plan. Will you answer the call?
So that was answering the call and Bridges for Peace in action in Israel. So Matt, we have to discuss everything now pretty much when it comes to Israel in the context of October the 7th, the biggest mass terrorist attack in Israel's history. Thankfully we're placed now where all the living hostages have come home. There's a ceasefire, a fragile ceasefire in place as we're recording this program today. And suddenly the Israelis can just stop for a moment and just absorb the past 2 dramatic years. But share with us where you were on October 7th and when did you realise the true extent of the horrors that are unfolding and how did it kind of play out in Australia?
Well, I was at home and when it broke forth, and just the only I guess parallel or significant comparison was it took me by surprise, like when in 9/11 when the Twin Towers came down. It was so horrific, it was hard to get your head around the fact that this is real. It was so catastrophic, and in all honesty, Simon, I've spent the last 2 years fighting back tears. It has so impacted me. Not because I've known anyone personally in the sense of, close friends that died, but I know people whose family members have, whose cousins, all sorts of close relations. And just the horrific nature, and then had the privilege of being in Israel a year later on the anniversary of October 7 with Michael and the rest of the Bridges for Peace team from around the world, going down and seeing the sites, hearing the accounts of what went on and the horrific things that were perpetrated, against the Jewish people, and not just their Jews. There was non-Jews that were attacked, and we know that. And it has shaken our nation. And the sad thing is, on the very next day, things were still unfolding in Israel. There was marches on the streets of Australia, marches in support of Palestine, which effectively is marching in support of Hamas, as those who know the truth know. And in our nation, a nation that has a proud and rich heritage of standing with Israel, is now tolerating, not just tolerating, but allowing over 100,000 people in one march to march across our bridge. And there's been tens of thousands of marches across Australia. I think Australia has one of the highest levels of marches in support of Palestine across the world. We're in the top 10. I think I read just a fact the other day, and of top 10 supporters of Palestine with marches and things in our streets. So it's really shaken the Jewish community, but it's shaken the Christians who support Israel as well. We've seen a bit of toing and froing, but there is a rising up of support for Israel. It's slow, it's small, but there is a definite increase. There's Australia, the Jewish community, because we work so closely with them, are really expressing to us that they never thought that they would see the day that they would feel unsafe in Australia. But they are feeling unsafe. There's been arson attacks on synagogues, a huge increase in attacks and on Jews and going to schools, students going to school, students at school. They're afraid to go to school because they're being called horrendous names. They're being victimised and bullied just for being Jewish. We've got shops being attacked, as I said, synagogues being attacked, graffiti everywhere, swastikas being drawn on lockers of students at school and things like that. The incidence of anti-Semitic attacks in Australia has exponentially increased since October 7.
And that's a lot of the news that we are sadly hearing here in the UK coming out of Australia, particularly the likes of CBN and others who are actually reporting on this pandemic of Jew hatred in Australia. Tricia, share with us your perspective on what you see happening and how the Jewish community is feeling very vulnerable. And we've got a news report shortly featuring my good friend Alex Rifchin, who's one of the Jewish leaders in Australia, and he was a regular on the Middle East Report when partner launched this program back in 2010 and 2011. So just share with us, how bad is the situation the Jewish community is facing?
Well, the week before we came over to Israel, we drove from top of Queensland down through to Brisbane for a meeting, and we thought, well, it'll be supported. It was, going to have a lot of things. They were there to commemorate and to be with the Jewish community. We thought there'd be a lot of Christians there supporting, and there might have been 30, maybe 50 people there, and it was, not many of the Jewish community were even there, but a lot of them are scared to come out to functions like that. It's always kept quiet until the last minute so that, it cannot be stopped and things like that. But even speaking to a young lady who had a Star of David necklace on, and she was like, well, Matthew, I think, even asked her, how do you get on with wearing that? And she said, well, I do and I don't. I swap it out and put on a, she said, I can hide and be like a Kiwi, because I look a little bit like that. So she's, they're not displaying their heritage because they are in fear of, attacks and things like that. So, and that's just in one spot that we're there. So.
And Matt, is there a parallel between our current Labour government led by Keir Starmer, which is of the hard left, and the Islamist penetration into our government, and our government actually just literally sending out the white flag of surrender to the Islamists in this country? Is Australia going through the same process with your Prime Minister, voting for a Palestinian state and effectively turning a blind eye to this rampant Jew hatred that we're seeing in both our nations?
I think absolutely, Simon. It's very clear that that's exactly what's going on. With the rise of Donald Trump in the US having a totally different line, and then we see the other members of the Commonwealth, Canada, France, England, Australia and France joining in and just supporting the Palestinian state, coming out and declaring. The shock to me was that New Zealand, our cousin across the ditch, didn't recognise the Palestinian state, which to most of us over in Australia took us by surprise, and we were like, go New Zealand. But our government is very much, instead of hitting things on the head when they rose up on October 8, they basically bowed and surrendered. We're importing migration. Mass migration is a big topic in Australia right now. The official figures are, masked and covered up, as most governments do, but the figures are, almost 500,000 migrants a year are coming into Australia, and 80% of those are Muslim. And that's having an increased influence on the government. Many people are seeing that the government's buying votes. They're pandering to certain elements of our nation that have different dynamics within those electorates. And one of the really sad things for me is we as Christians are organising events, I was part of organising a very pro-Israel event in Brisbane, and we had to get incredible security. At first they told us not to do it. The police said no, we advise you not to. And on some instances where there's a pro-Palestinian march or event taking place, they don't register, they don't go about it through the right channels, they just turn up and organise it, and they turn up in the streets. When we approach the police or the government to say, hey, can we have a counter show of support for Israel, not a protest, they say no. If you do, you will be arrested. We will put you in jail for inciting violence. Yet they're out there chanting death to the Jews, gas the Jews. One sad indictment on our nation was in the early part of this was in New South Wales. They were marching saying gas the Jews from the pro-Palestinians. It was as loud and as clear as anybody who has ears to hear. The New South Wales Police Force did an investigation into that some months later because it became a hot topic. And the official, after spending weeks and umpteen tens of thousands of dollars, no doubt, on an inquiry as to what they're actually saying, the official line and report that came out from our New South Wales Police Commissioner was that they weren't saying gas the Jews, they were saying where's the Jews. This is how bad it's got within our country, even to lie, and everybody knew what they were saying. But that was the official line, because that then let them off the hook of doing anything about it.
That's disgusting.
It's terrible.
Let's have a look at this shocking CBN news report. This one's entitled "Australian Jews Look to Leave as Anti-Semitism Explodes Down Under."
When 2 Muslim nurses from the Sydney area hospital were suspended and then charged for boasting in a social media video about killing Jewish patients, it brought Australia's growing epidemic of Jew hatred to the world's attention.
I have a question though. All right, for sure. I have a question though. I have a question. Let's say an Israeli, God forbid.
I won't treat them. I'll kill them.
You'll kill them? So if an Israeli is in Australia and God forbid something happened to him and he comes to your hospital,
I hope to God.
Would you kill him?
You have no idea how many Israeli Khara dog came to this hospital and I sent it to Jahannam.
However, Australia's top Jewish leader told us this is only one of the latest incidents in what he described as an explosion of anti-Semitism down under. Alex Rivchin is co-chief executive of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry.
A synagogue which was incinerated, a childcare centre, private homes, cars. This is what we've been dealing with in Australia for the past 16 months.
This Melbourne synagogue, founded by Holocaust survivors, was firebombed in December. Arsonists also targeted Rivchin's former home, leaving anti-Jewish graffiti in an attempted attack against him. Australia's top spy chief now says fighting anti-Semitism is his agency's top priority. The nation has a new law against Jew hatred, and anti-Semitism has become an election issue. Rivchin says he's grateful something is finally being done, but says it should have happened sooner, like the day after October 7th, when an Islamic cleric in the streets of Sydney said he was delighted by the massacre, or when this pro-Hamas crowd chanted "Gas the Jews," or when Jewish buildings were vandalized and set on fire.
And there was very little done about this. There was very little political condemnation from the necessary places. There was very little police action. There was an inability to identify these people, and so things cascaded from there. We've seen this play out thousands of times in our history. We know where it leads.
Rivchin says he's hearing some Australian Jews, some the descendants of Holocaust survivors, beginning to say they would feel safer in Israel.
And it's kind of crazy to contemplate that people in Australia in our time feel less safe here than they would in a war zone, fighting on multiple fronts. But the more that these incidents take place and become normalized and happen in every sector, in the hospital sector now, in the universities, the schools and professions, it makes people really question their future in this country.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
And thanks to CBN, we can really truly see the extent of Jew hatred that has occurred in Australia ever since October the 7th. And, the medical profession is one of honour, where people go into that profession because they love people and they want to get better. But to actually then say that you want to kill Israelis, if they ever found themselves in hospital, those people should be struck off and never be able to have or serve in the medical profession again. Tricia, what is your response to that highly inflammatory social media report that was picked up then by CBN, to the extent that some medical professionals would not only not treat Israelis, but would actually kill them in hospital? And we know that news story went global, went around the world.
It's devastating to think that, even if you just mention God, let alone being a Jew, but if you mention even God, that things would happen to you that opposite to what you're there for. And I don't think the Jews even expect, because they're living there as people. They wouldn't expect that to happen. And it's absolutely heartbreaking, but there's so many of the people coming into the profession that what sort of ethnics do they have? And that's not a requirement within your medical profession on your own ethics, but it's making a lot of people think on what are these people going to do? Because we have a lot of un-Australians in our medical profession. So it does make you think when you go into a doctor just on what is going to happen. So even as Australians, even I think the other day I mentioned something when I was at a dentist, something about God, and I felt like I got charged a lot more. I got charged a lot more by saying something about God because it was not an Australian or an original Australian treating me. So, you know, is that happening to a lot of other people that you don't hear about?
No,
how things are working.
And we know it's been a very difficult year, particularly for the Jewish community in Australia for the past 2 years. But share with us how, under your leadership and under God's guidance through Bridges for Peace, that you guys have been able to make a big difference in showing that love and support for the Jewish community at a time when they feel like they're under siege, they feel like their government is against them, they have no friends who are really standing up for them, but you guys really are. So thank you for doing that. But just unpack for us what you are doing to show solidarity with the Jewish community in Israel, in Australia.
Certainly. One of the biggest things, you know, I mean, in general, the thing that Bridges for Peace does is stand with the Jewish community. That's who we are. That's our mission statement, is to build relationships between Christians and Jews. But in this last 2 years, since October 7, that has become more and more paramount in our mission, to literally just be present at things. One of the greatest things we're doing is being present, rallying Christians, rallying people from around the nation to get to events, to get to things that show support to the Jewish community. Because the heart cry, and if, you know, the old saying, if I had $1 for every time I'd heard it, I'd be a rich man, that we hear all the time is, we feel alone. We feel alone. And so as Christians, one of our greatest responsibilities is to get out there and show the Jewish community that they're not alone.
Absolutely.
That we stand with them through thick and through thin. And one of the things I'm so proud of Bridges for Peace on the ground in Israel was our volunteers never left after October 7. None of our people requested to go home. They were given the option by our CEO to say, if you feel unsafe and you need, we'll actually pay for your flight. But none of them did. Why? Because they wanted to show that they are committed to this journey through thick and through thin, not just in the good times when it's easy, but when the rubber's really hitting the road, and when it's crucial and important for us to say to the Jewish community in action, not just in word, but that we are with you, and we are with you through to the end of this journey. Wherever that takes us, we're standing with you, we love you. So attending functions, showing support financially where we can. But the biggest thing, as I said, is really just being present, saying, hey, as a Christian, we stand with you. For the reason that our hearts are one with you because of what God has done in our lives, and we wouldn't have what we have as Christians without the Jewish people. And I think the church needs a big reminder in that, you know. One of the scriptures, if I may share, that has really impacted my life, and it's transformed my journey so much so that just a month or so after I got home from that very first trip to Israel, I was sitting having a quiet time, and I'm reading the Bible, and as Christians we do regularly, and if not every day, hopefully, and I'm reading, and I read a passage of scripture, a verse that hit me so hard because I knew I'd read that verse many, many times, yet I'd never seen it before. I'm not talking about, now I understand it. And this is exactly how it happened. I read the verse, and at the moment I was reading the verse, I had this impression like Jesus was sitting next to me. Not physically, not tangibly, but an impression. When I read the verse, I turned to look as though Jesus was sitting there, and I said to him, did you just put that in there because that was not there before? And it's Romans 15:27. And I would encourage every Christian that hears this or watches this broadcast to read Romans 15:27. Take it as a challenge and share it with your friends, because I had a moment last year where I shared it with a good friend of mine who's a passionate Israel supporter, loves Israel, loves the Jewish people. And when I shared with him how God had revealed it to me, he had the same moment. He actually ran to get his Bible to see that I wasn't making it up, that I was actually reading the verse properly. And it was a way God showed me that there's a veil that can come across Christians' eyes that we don't see the reality of Israel and the Jewish people in our Bible because of the influence of replacement theology and all these other forces that are in there to separate us as Christians from our Jewish brothers and sisters.
No, absolutely. And Tricia, share with us what response you've had from the Jewish community on Australia when you've shown them that love and the support and reassured them they're not alone despite this rise of evil, despite the hatred being inflicted against them, which is unparalleled really in our lifetimes.
The connection is just amazing. You know, a lot of the walls are dropping down, and you feel, I feel that Matthew is connecting with them a lot easier, and they're just, contacting each other on a regular basis as well, which makes a big difference. They know that the support is there, and it's both ways because, they've got so much to sow into us. It's a two-way street that we're helping each other in lots of ways. So I think that is, they're receiving from us God's love that, they know about. They know about God's love, and they're just receiving from Christians that they may not have done before.
Amazing.
So the doors are getting opened.
Yeah. And Matt, you've just come back from Israel. That's why you're here in London before you fly back to Australia, back home. Share with us what it was like to be in Israel during that historical time when, the living hostages came home, the Gaza peace plan was signed, US President Donald Trump, only the fourth US president in Israel's history to ever address the Israeli Knesset. And for the first time, I think, in 2 years, the Israelis were actually smiling.
Yeah, absolutely. Very noticeable when we landed. The atmosphere was different to being here a year ago. A year ago, it was very somber, it was very down, it was, in the middle of everything, and, a year on and there hadn't seemed to be much progress. But this year, 2 years on, with the peace proposal and the deal and the hostage return, there was definitely a more upbeat atmosphere in the land. However, the Jewish people aren't stupid. They've got a lot of history and a lot of understanding of how history unfolds. There's still a reluctance to fully buy into the peace and that it's going to last and all those things. But the general mood is definitely more upbeat, and relief, I guess, is probably the greatest word. There's a great sense of relief, especially amongst the families of the hostages who've come home. They're still working with the dead bodies. There's still some being held, which is still, something that, so many people write off, but they're dead, why worry? But it reflects very clearly and very strongly the value of life, that life isn't about just while you're living, your body is part of your life. And to give that body a proper burial and bring them home, not leave them, in a foreign land, so to speak, in Gaza, is very important to the Jewish people. And it's a two-pronged, double-sided sword, double-edged sword, as I say. There's the excitement and the relief, but then on the other side, there's still that apprehension of how long will it last. Hamas has already shown their colours in that, what they're doing over there, that it's, it's highly unlikely it's going to last long, what it's going to look like. So, but Israel gets on with life. They enjoy things while they're in the moment, and they look with expectation and very much an attitude of hope. But there's also the reality that is, very true as well.
Absolutely, and of course, what's coming to the fore most, isn't it, Tricia, is the whole problems that the Israelis are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Israel's a small country, everyone knows each other. They would have known one of those 1,200 Israelis and foreign nationals who were murdered on October the 7th. They would have known the hostages, or they would have known family or friends of the hostages, because they're all connected. But share with us, and also the fact that we've seen almost 200,000 Israelis move up from their homes, evacuate their homes in the south and in the north over the past 2 years, and how the country is kind of reeling with post-traumatic stress disorder. Share with us what Bridges for Peace is helping to restore and rebuild lives in Israel.
They're doing a lot. They're helping out with counselling for people. They are even just loving on them, helping feed them. you know, talking with them, because a lot have learnt Hebrew, so when they're out and about they can communicate with them. But the people are hurting, and you know, hey, every nation has its PTSD for different reasons, but this is just something that it's going to take time. And being uprooted from homes, it changes people and the children, and having to go into bomb shelters on a regular basis and things like that. Even when we were there, it had that opportunity that we may have had to go into a shelter because you know, bombs were being fired around and about us. So things like that, it's a stress to people, and it'll be a continuous one until God brings us home.
Absolutely. So let's see how Bridges for Peace are really helping make a difference, particularly in the lives of Israelis suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Take a look.
Not all wounds bleed. PTSD haunts thousands of Israelis. Your gift funds counseling and care that restores lives after October 7th. Give to the Crisis Fund today to help Israel heal.
So I'd like to thank the excellent work being done by Bridges for Peace for tackling a really important issue in Israel, and that is post-traumatic stress disorder, which is so important. Matt, just share with us as well some of the kind of exciting projects that Bridges is offering, particularly this project to help humanitarian aid, particularly to help children and parents who have suffered from the horrors of October the 7th.
Yeah, we've had an incredible influx of, great shout out to our supporters right around the world. Bridges for Peace supporters rise incredibly, powerfully and supportively when there's a crisis. And in particular, our supporters are great right across the board. In general, every week in, week out, pensioners. And I only speak from Australia, but we have a lot of pensioners who just give $10 a month out of their pension, which is huge given the cost of living increases. But with the crisis appeal that was launched by Bridges for Peace after October 7, the incredible amount of finances come in for that to meet the everyday needs, to go the extra mile and provide things that obviously the government and people aren't able to do on the ground in Israel. Buying toys for children who are, been displaced. So as you mentioned, so many people have been displaced out of their homes from the north and the south of Israel. And just to be able to give them a small gift, give them, little things that they miss from home, especially children. Our heart, having 5 children, goes out to families with children. And Israeli families, they love each other. They're all about family. They're all about sticking together and supporting one another. And when they're displaced and you haven't got the comforts of home and your toys and things as children. So Bridges for Peace has been able to meet some of those needs. Obviously, we'd love to do more. So if you're out there and you want to support Bridges for Peace, it is a ministry that is changing lives on a daily basis in Israel, and really making a difference to let the Jewish people know that they are loved, that we stand with them. And we've had the privilege of furnishing units for people who have lost their homes or haven't been able to find housing and so forth, which is a big struggle in Israel. Anyone that's been to Israel would know that there's a lot of people in a small land, but housing is a big problem because
absolutely.
the number of immigrants, number of Israelis that are making Aliyah, and that's one point I just want to go back to. Israel, the Jewish community from Australia is making Aliyah at a rapid rate. We've had more Jews applied to make Aliyah in the last 12 months than ever before. Oof. So that tells you, it gives you a very clear picture of what's going on the ground, that they're feeling unsafe, and the safest place for them is to come, even though it's a hard journey, to get back to their land, get back to Israel, where they know at least they can call that home and they'll be safe.
Absolutely. So let's look at this remarkable project of actually helping children suffering from the horrors of October the 7th. And this is a wonderful project to support, and this is thanks to Bridges for Peace.
We are here in Carmiel at Hadekel School, where we sponsor 80 children on our Feed a Child program. We're a few days away from the start of the school year, and so today we've brought backpacks and school kits so that these kids can start the year off on the right foot.
The Bridges of Peace help the children, first of all, to believe themselves that somebody believes them. Think about them, bless them, give them support. You give them to be happy because they know somebody loves them, somebody think about them. So really, thank you very much for your support to them.
Starting a new school year can be a stressful time for families who don't have the funds to provide everything the children need. Thanks to Christian donors, we can help relieve the financial burden that's found at the beginning of every school year for the parents. We make sure that the students get a hot meal every day, we get those backpacks and the school supplies, and we send them off to school with love and support from Christians around the world.
מודים לכם על כל השנים האלה שעזרתם למשפחה שלנו, על התרומות שלכם, על האוכל, על הציוד לבית ספר. אני מברכת אתכם, את המשפחות שלכם, ואני מאוד מודה לכם שאתם אוהבי ישראל, ומאחלת שאלוהים יחזיר לכם בשפע.
Join us by donating to the Feed a Child program today and bring hope to an Israeli child.
And such an important project that every child in Israel needs to feel like they're loved, and this is what Bridges for Peace are doing. Down to the last 5 minutes or so of the programme, Tricia, and you're both doing a great job, and thank you for giving us an Australian perspective on the issues facing the Jewish community on Australia and Israel as well. But share with us, Tricia, why it's so important and why it's an incredible adventure for Christians to understand God's plans and purposes for Israel, but also to apply that theological understanding of Israel into such a practical and loving way, and building those relationships and friendship with Israel and the Jewish community back in Australia.
Well, the Bible tells us that it's got some, it states this, and this, and this. And we've got to take it as the Word of God and act on it. So acting on that, on loving people and loving people. It's not just Jews, even though he says to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and all of those things, but it's loving people no matter what. So even the ones that are creating problems, we still got to love them, but we just don't like what they're doing. So just being able to build on that, on getting hold of the word and applying it and learning it and putting it into action. And putting it into action means loving people. God loved us first, so we need to love others, because he gave us the ultimate sacrifice of his son, so we can sacrifice ourselves to be able to give out that love where often it hasn't been. And getting to know people, building relationships with people that often doesn't happen. Australia can be one of those things where you don't know each other's neighbours and things like that, and we've got to step out past that. Get to know each other a lot better and to shine God's word out there for everybody, not just...
Absolutely. So I've got just a two-part question for you, Matt. The first thing is, how can our British viewers watching this programme today be praying for you and the Ministry of Bridges for Peace in Australia and the Jewish community, but also how can they get involved and support these wonderful projects of blessing Israel and the Jewish people? Because it also reflects my heart, and this is what this programme's about, the Middle East Report, is building a bridge between Israel, the Jewish community and Christians together, and to demonstrate God's love and purpose for them at this critical time in history.
Absolutely, thank you so much. And I want to start that answering that question by stating that this is not about Israel. It's not about the Jewish people. It's not about the church. It's about the heart of God.
Amen.
And when we love what God loves, as we should, then his heart has never shifted and never changed towards the Jewish people, to his land. It has had such a dramatic impact on my life that I know that only God could do it. And if he's done it for me, he wants to do it for everybody. And all it takes is for us to open our heart to the truth and to look into the Word of God. But please, you know, one of the things I need prayer for, we need prayer for across the broad spectrum of our nation across the world, but in particular in Australia, we need prayer for God to open doors into the churches, especially the bigger churches. There's, you know, we have a very significant impact in the smaller churches, you know, around that 50 to 100 mark of churches, people in the congregation, but churches over 100 just don't seem to want to open their doors too much to the message that we carry. This vital and absolutely crucial message of God's relationship with the church. And please, if you want to get involved, get onto our website. You know, there's a very brand new website we've got now, which makes it much easier for you to connect, to find out what we do, the projects that we have, and how you can donate to Bridges for Peace and make a lasting difference in the lives of people and bring blessing to not just your own life, but to the church you're involved in and your community. Because Genesis 12:3 lays it out very clear: I will bless those who bless thee, and I will curse those who curse thee. And that word curse is a terrible translation. It actually means, it's better translated, I will curse those who are ambivalent towards thee, who treat you lightly. In other words, if we treat Israel lightly and the Jewish people lightly, then God does not like that.
Absolutely. Matt and Tricia, thank you so much for being my special guests on the Middle East Report today. You've done a great job and a great testimony of the power of God working in both of your lives and Bridges for Peace in Australia. And thank you so much for standing with the Jewish community and the nation of Israel and Australia. So we will be praying for you more and standing with you as well. In your fight is our fight as we stand with the Jewish people. So thank you. And thank you for watching today's program. We have to understand the extraordinary work being carried out for Bridges for Peace in Israel in bridging that divide between Christians and Jews. That's why it's imperative that we get behind this ministry, we pray for it, we support it. But also it's so important that as Christians here in the UK that we understand the situation in Australia, because we know that so many Australian Jewish people feel scared and frightened, just like they do in the UK, and how we are facing the same sort of problems. So it's important and imperative to speak up, to pray and to act. So thank you for watching today's Middle East Report.